Joe, the thriller of the weekend. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Michigan and Ohio State. It was. We got to go down to the Peach State because Georgia and Georgia Tech in an outright thriller. Man, you want to talk about it? Friday night was electric. It was fun. Your thoughts on the 44-42 win that Georgia had over Georgia Tech?
Yeah, this was an absolute insane game to watch. And like I tweeted this out, there was no way to go to bed after watching this game with how crazy it was.
So much adrenaline.
Right. And I can't imagine what it was like being on that field playing in that game. From the Georgia angle here, I keep coming back to this, and I keep wondering, what the heck would this Georgia team be if they played locked-in football for 4 quarters? They played one game against Texas where they were dialed up, playing everything as soundly as possible. Not a perfectly clean game because Carson Beck had interceptions that game. If they play to their potential, they're a great team. They played to their potential for 1 quarter, and that was all it took for them to get back into the game, and they got a little help from some officiating. I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole. When they played that 4th quarter and in overtime the way that they needed to, they won. That version of Georgia is so talented, but it's so odd to see them and talk about them starting slow and playing undisciplined and unfocused football. Because for the remaining 3 quarters, Georgia Tech said, we're going to run up every single play and we're going to bop you in the mouth and we're just going to keep running the football. And they exposed Georgia's run defense a little bit for being weaker than we thought it was. And on top of this, I got to give credit to Carson Beck. This was the best game that he's had all season. But he made some unreal throws in this game that were very necessary for them to win this game. So if he can play up to that potential and play like that during the playoffs, and maybe this was a catalyst for some confidence for him, they could continue to go on a run here. But it feels awkward and ugly for me to say that after they played so shit for the starting 3 quarters of this game.
I don't disagree. I do think that there are people that will say rivalry weeks should be graded on a curve. I'm not necessarily one of those people, okay? But I understand it. Look, man, Brent Key, we start off with the winners here, but I got to throw this out there. Brent Key is building something at Georgia Tech. I don't know if they can win the ACC. I don't know about any of that. What I do know is the way that their culture is built, they're going to be a tough and physical football team. But, man, I got to come out and admit where I was wrong. I did not think Haynes King was the direction to go. I didn't like the kid's throwing motion. I'd seen him in the SEC, and I went against a big rule that I have for myself. Don't judge a kid by 1 season as a freshman. Joe, that kid's nothing but heart. And I'm going to be real with you. Did you see, or I'm going to ask you this. Did you see Haynes King in the postgame?
No, actually, I didn't catch it.
Okay. His direct quote was, "I'm tired of being in this situation where we keep losing. And I gave it everything out there tonight." Joe, there's something to be said about an 18 to 21-year-old kid that puts a team on his back. Now, I'll talk about the Notre Dame thing in a moment with the whole Georgia Tech incident, okay? But the thing about that was Haynes King did not play in that game. That kid Friday night, Joe, I will take Haynes King 10 times out of 10 to lead me as a quarterback because he was putting his head down. He was getting tough yardage. He was getting first downs. I don't know if the fumble that he had, I don't know if it's targeting or not targeting. He had a big hit put on him, but he toughed it out. And I think that that's what kept him in the game. I know Haynes had some crazy plays. I get it. But, bro, when I look at Haynes King, he had 303 yards passing. Joe, he had 110 yards on the ground with 3 touchdowns. He had 5 total touchdowns. Now, we look at Georgia and say, well, Georgia's not the same defense. They're still a top 10 defense in the country. This is not like Georgia's issues have come on offense. Their defense has been stout for majority of the part of the year. Yeah. And I look at Haynes. Joe, when was the last time? I actually do have this statistic. When was the last time that a quarterback put over 450 yards and 5 scores on Georgia? Do you want to know who it is?
It was.
Yes. In the SEC champion. So again, when I look at it and everybody's like, "Oh, Haynes King," I know people want to point and laugh at Georgia. That kid played his ass off, and that's the bottom line. Now, my thought on Georgia. Joe, not being able to run the football is going to bite them in the ass, and it might bite them in the ass this week. Now, when you upset Texas a couple of weeks ago and you beat them by 15, what did you do moderately effectively? You ran the football. Joe, I'm going to keep saying it. I like Georgia as a team. I think they have weapons and pieces. There's nothing for Mike Bobo to do with the offensive line that he has right now currently that's getting their shit pushed in. He's calling inside zone, Joe. I mean, like, we're calling 32 dive. What are we talking about? 34 zone. Like, what are we doing? So I think that their play calling has had to be so unique, and the drops don't help either, that they can't line up and have basic zone.
That ultimately is a great point, because it's something that we've talked about this entire year, that if like the specific deficiencies in this game, just besides them deciding to turn it on with like half of the game remaining, them not being able to convert early in those short yardage situations. There was the 4th and 2 or whatever it was. And then you're right. They called it an inside run, and they couldn't convert. They couldn't get the push. They got driven off the ball against a team that wanted it more. And you're going to, when you get to the playoffs, you're going to be dealing with every single week a team that wants it more. You got to find a way to nut up and to convert in those situations. And we haven't seen it all season long. That's why I bring up in the lead into the segment of, like, which version of Georgia do we have? Which version are we going to get? Are we going to get that version that ran all over Texas and stormed back against Alabama and stormed back against Georgia Tech? Or are we going to get the version that plays sloppy and mistake-filled and lazy and messy and just not converting in the areas that they need? And I do have to, like, really harp on this. Giving up 260 yards rushing and to give up the big rushing gains that they did on a series-by-series basis, I think a lot of teams are going to drop on film what Georgia Tech did and try to find ways to convert.
Pause. Well, not that kind of pause. Pause. Nothing that Georgia Tech did was complicated.
No,
they ran power zone.
And I know what they did was
typical power. And I'm like, and to your point, it's kind of to a point where I'm like, 3rd and 3, I'd run power. And here's the truth about Georgia Tech, and I love Brent Key. Hey, man, I just because Haynes King fumbled, give it to Haynes, okay, the running back. Run power. They haven't stopped it all night. Like, why are you doing this? And then to your point earlier about your earlier point about Carson Beck, dude, the throws he made in the 4th quarter, oh my God.
Yeah. No, he made some unbelievable throws. But just to round out what I was talking about with going up against these teams that are going to try and run the ball, I see a good chunk of teams in the playoff that are good rushing teams that they could get squared off with that could knock them off. I know that you're going to scoff at some of these names that I'm going to bring up, but Penn State's a team that runs the ball really freaking well and has a good interior offensive line. Oregon is a team.
James Franklin?
I don't. I'm just saying, just like purely from
James Franklin,
purely from the X's and O's standpoint.
You gonna take Kirby or James?
I'm taking Kirby, but all I'm saying is that if Penn State can probably run the ball on you. Notre Dame can run the ball on you because similar play style with how they use Riley Leonard is how they just use Haynes King. And if Denbrock's smart enough, and we know Denbrock's smart enough, he's going to pull all of the same plays that worked and converted if they were squared off with them.
To your point, I agree with you on Notre Dame about this. You saw a system that could beat them. Here would be the question that I have. Don't kill me on this. It's a question. Does Riley Leonard for 24 carries go in the hole and be met in the hole by big linebackers, D linemen, and safeties the way that Haynes King did? I don't know.
He's not more physical of a runner than Haynes King is. So, yeah, I trust him.
No, Joe, after that 15th carry, it's a lot about heart. Quarterbacks don't run as much. They
haven't called. I think in the playoff, they're going to call on him and use him a lot more as a runner. I think that they have deliberately avoided it because they know that he's more reckless than Haynes King is. Do you watch? So, like, seriously, like, for any Notre Dame fan knows this, when he tries to barrel his way into the end zone or for short yardage situations, he throws his whole body into it. They have to keep him from doing that because he will injure himself.
It's cute to do that against USC. I'm talking about Georgia.
He's stronger than Haynes King.
All right.
We're gonna
you completely missed the point and go down a different rabbit hole that needs to.
You asked the question. You asked if I thought that he could convert those situations. I answered yes.
I'm talking about you. You didn't see the underlying thing. I'm talking about his heart. I'm talking about if CJ Allen meets him in a hole 3 or 4 times, is he going to be willing to go back on there? Is he okay? All right,
he's done it.
Okay,
I think you're down. Okay,
CJ Allen. Go get his. All right.
I'm not doing that. I'm not
okay.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.